Hello and welcome back to another session of Nirvana with Nav. It feels good to be back behind the mic after a busy couple of weeks with work and life and feeling like some of the wind got taken out of my sails, but we're back. I hope everybody's been doing well. Before we get into today's session, I want to answer a couple of questions that were asked. So let's get started. The first question I got asked was, what was the hardest part of meditation when you first started? So let me preface my answer by saying that I've only been meditating for just under a year. But in that time, I've done it daily, often multiple times. And I've come to develop a deeper relationship with the practice itself. So I think I can at least offer my 2 cents. Meditating's hard. From the viewpoint of a meditator, everybody has the ADHD. I think before you go into the whole discussion of accessing the present moment and being one with your body and all of that deep discussion about meditating, above all else, meditation is about activating the relaxation response in your body. And it's a committed practice. Practice. Practice to that process so that it doesn't matter if you're sitting down, lying down, walking, talking, running, moving about, you're still able to remain relaxed. I think like the actual scientific term is called homeostasis. But above all else, it's about understanding that the most tangible benefit of starting a meditation practice is to help you relax. Okay, but it is hard. I think that's something that has to be accepted. Fidgeting's going to be normal. Restlessness is going to come to the surface. You're going to get itchy in weird spots. Something's going to feel like it's touching you, but it's probably not. These are all the things that you're going to experience when you first start meditating. And it's okay to fidget. It's okay to get that itch. What's that saying? Treat others how you would like to be treated. I think it's ironic that we can more easily treat others the way we would like to be treated than treating ourselves how we would like to be treated. And so, as you start a meditation practice, you're going to have to be patient with yourself because most people, if you're my age or older, you've built decades of habits, of tendencies, of storylines, of thought patterns, of defense mechanisms, of you name it. And it's not even about ridding of them, but to just sit and observe them. And even that can be overwhelming. I think there was I can't remember what institution, but a study was published where the results of the study found that a lot of people starting meditation practice actually spike in anxiety and negative thought patterns. And I can totally see why. Meditating's like, it's like giving you access into Pandora's box. Okay, that might be a bit extreme, maybe? I don't know. But there's a lot to be seen in there. And at the same time, you have the key to the box. You can close that box and just chill. I hope that one stuck. I don't know. That analogy might have been a bit out there. I can try a more formal one. You're sitting and you're watching traffic pass by. Each car representing a thought, an emotion, an idea, a storyline. And what meditation helps us do is create space from those thoughts, those ideas, those feelings. And it'll take time to create space from something that you've carried with you for years and years. And it ultimately won't go anywhere. It'll always be there, but the claws won't be so dug in. It won't feel like a steel chain holding onto you. Maybe like a string. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that one of the hardest things to work around is those tendencies, and to give yourself that patience that you're so desperately going to need. To not look at those tendencies, those habits, those storylines, those thoughts with any judgment or any bias, but to simply accept them and then come back to the active practice of breathing, which is that core essence of what meditation is. Returning to the breath. I'll definitely touch on this subject more because I've seen a lot of interest in it. But patience, we'll start with that. I was also asked for some book recommendations, so I'm going to try to cover a couple of different categories. If you want to get to know a bit more about Stoicism, I would recommend The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's more or less his personal journal, and whatever he's written in it is for us to see and understand. But I think as you read through the meditations, you develop an understanding of how a Stoic thinks. If you want to learn more about nature, a book that really blew my mind was The Hidden Life of Trees. I'm going to say that one more time. The Hidden Life of Trees. I'm going to read my review for the book that I published on Audible. Here it goes. We walk by hundreds, if not thousands, of trees on a routine basis, but do we ever stop to consider what a tree is? The author does a tremendous job at conveying this abstract concept through chapters of engaging and entertaining dialogue. The relationship between humans and nature is one that has been vastly forgotten by today's culture and society, but the lessons of this book do a great job at bringing some of our awareness back. If you've listened to some of my other episodes, I mention that disconnect between us as a species and nature. And this book really opened my eyes to that issue even further. For instance, a lot of the trees that we use for commercial purposes, they're about 120 years old in human years, which is only about 20 years of the tree's life. So a lot of the trees that we end up using are still in their infancy. And there's a lot of other cool stuff in that book about how trees communicate with one another, our connection with trees and nature and the healing effect. So there's that. The one book that I recommended the most throughout the last year is called Breath by James Nestor. And I think it's the single most important book that a lot of people can listen to, because there's a lot of actionable stuff in that book that you can take back and implement back into your own life for your benefit. I think the statistic is it's in the high percentages, but a lot of us are chronically imbalanced in our breathing. Whether it's our in breath, our out breath, being a mouth breather, having sleep apnea, um, all of these issues. And there's a lot to show for society's impacts, such as like a poor diet, weaker jaw muscles over time, um, having weaker noses, just a lot of cool stuff. But it really has changed my perspective of how I train. When I go out for bike rides, when I go out for a run, when I'm working out or I'm training in jiu-jitsu, I'm trying my best to be cognizant of my breathing, to keep my mouth closed, to control my breath in and out. And this all comes back to this whole concept of mindfulness and meditating and entering flow states. There's a lot to unpack there, but this is a really cool book that expands on that concept in a really detailed way. The author did a lot of research for this and firsthand took part in a lot of the experimentation himself. So I recommend that. And last but not least, I think The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's a really short book, probably about like 150 pages. I read it for the first time in the summer of last year. And it's a really feel good kind of book. Positive and uplifting. It's about manifesting your own destiny, and it really, the picture is painted very beautifully, is the best I can say. So those were the 4 books that I'll recommend for this time around. The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wallenbaum, Breath by James Nestor, and The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. If you ever have any questions, feel free to slide into my DMs. That's Nirvana with Nav on Instagram. With those questions out of the way, we can get started with today's session. As always, let's take a deep breath and create a sense of calm comfort in that space between your ears. And let's begin. Who is the you that lives behind your eyes? When you look at yourself in a mirror, who do you see? And on the flip side, who do you allow yourself to see? To see all of you as you are, without judgment, without shame, requires vulnerability. Think about something like smiling. We've come to live in a society where it's easier to lie with a smile than to tell the truth with any other expression. So simple yet so subtle. The smile, once known to express happiness and sincerity, has become a sort of a conditioned disguise, put forth to hide, repress, deflect, or bottle problems and emotions so we don't burden others with something that might not be their concern. We have an extraordinary capacity to endure and suffer, but we can only stretch ourselves so far before we ultimately snap, break, or crack under pressure. The smile has become a defense mechanism to fight our fear of vulnerability because we've been led to believe that vulnerability is weakness. So what ends up holding us back is shame, which is the act of judging yourself, to have feelings about your feelings. Dr. Brené Brown, who's a leading researcher on the aforementioned topic, defines vulnerability as choosing to express or make something important to you open to the thoughts and actions of someone else. And if you're interested more on the topic, She's got a wonderful Netflix special called Call to Courage that I would highly recommend. So, going back to that definition, choosing to express or make something important to you open to the thoughts and actions of someone else. Before we even talk about how to open up to someone else, I think it's important to realize that a lot of us can't even be vulnerable with ourselves. Instead of choosing to express something important to ourselves, we shame ourselves. We decide to have feelings about those feelings instead of just actually feeling what it is that you're feeling. There's rabbit holes in this. The fear of vulnerability limits your potential to live. When you choose to express or make something important to you open to the thoughts and actions of others, you're ultimately displaying courage. And if you remember from my previous session, the act of displaying courage is a reflection of your heart. In the context of the mirror, it's about resisting shame and judgment and working with acceptance. So many times we think about, if only I hadn't done this, or if only I wasn't this or that. But before we even get into those rabbit holes, why bother? So what? You are. You did. That was you. So what? Work with it. I think one of the more important lessons I've come to learn over time in accepting and expressing vulnerability is that your future self is always with you, whether you choose to acknowledge that or not. And the more that you're able to work towards and with acceptance, the more that you can realize that it's not about changing yourself, but rather only needing to see yourself more clearly, which is why the mirror is such a beautiful symbol for that. Vulnerability is just about being your best and being okay with the fact that in that moment, it might not be good enough. That's not to say that the outcome was good or bad, but it's more about surrendering to an unknown outcome in the present moment. And that kind of vulnerability can be expressed everywhere. For me, that type of vulnerability was learned and experienced through my journey on the wrestling mats. There's a legendary quote by a wrestler named Dan Gable that most, if not all, wrestlers live by. Once you've wrestled, everything in life is easy. And I've been immersed in combat sports for over a third of my life at this point. Wrestling isn't the hardest thing you'll do in life. That's what I came to learn. But it prepares you for the harder things that will eventually follow in life. It's about working past your lowest points in life and using them as a catalyst to become stronger than ever. There are, and there always will be, horrible setbacks in life. But instead of looking for excuses to lose, to display shame over your what ifs, to judge yourself on your past actions, instead of doing that, start looking for reasons to win, to be authentic, to be vulnerable, to be courageous. There's nothing like confronting vulnerability in high school more than stepping onto a wrestling mat in a skin-tight singlet in an atmosphere of BO and loud noises in a high school cafeteria. But it's deeper than that. Vulnerability can be expressed anywhere, not just on the wrestling mat. It can be expressed in a boardroom to present yourself as authentically as you can, on a date where you try your best to stay present in the moment, in an interview for a job where you have to present yourself as the best candidate for a role potentially, in the act of cooking as someone else tries your dish. in the act of singing, as someone else listens to your voice, or even simply on a yoga mat, where you try your best to hold a posture, only to tumble and fall and laugh and try again. Vulnerability shouldn't be so taboo. It shouldn't carry so much weight. Coming back to that smile. If you do smile, I hope your intentions are pure. You should be happy seeing yourself. Self-acceptance is an act of self-love. Of course, some people might be thinking, I wish I could lose 10 pounds here. Maybe I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. But so what, right? Those are things that you would like. But not having these qualities takes nothing away from who you are. Falling in like is easy. It's just as easy as not liking something. Falling in love with something is hard. It's about working past differences. Staying in love is scary because that's goes against the rational mind sometimes. You don't want life to become prosaic. That's your word of the day. A life that lacks beauty, where things lose their value. I feel like a lot of things we do just out of blind habit. Like I said, they've become conditioned responses, right? We live in such a connected society filled with such disconnected individuals. And it's brought about with the irony of social media. When we have a layer of anonymity and this veil that can shield us, at the end of the day, we're all humans, struggling daily on this finite journey of life. So instead of doing it alone, don't be afraid to reach out and ask others for help. A fresh perspective or even listening to yourself aloud can become a very enlightening experience. And I'm not advocating for anyone to go air their dirty laundry to the public or all over social media. However, we all have people in our lives that are willing to listen, offer advice, or help us in any way possible. That's invaluable. And if you don't have that, a journal will always listen to you. This idea of vulnerability naturally led me to ask a very important question. Who is the most important person in someone's life? I'll let you think about it. It should be you. You should be the most important person in your life. And if you got that question wrong, it's okay. We're commonly led to believe that being selfish is a bad thing because of the negative connotations that have been attributed to the word. Google returns the following synonyms: egocentric, self-absorbed, self-obsessed, wrapped up in oneself, inconsiderate. And when you put it like that, you can see how people build up feelings of feeling like imposters. Because to commit to yourself, to express yourself, to be selfish, to put time into yourself, is perceived as something that's negative. So anything that comes about it or from it is also received negatively then. No mention is there of investing in yourself. The greatest investment a person can make is to invest in themselves. That's inherently selfish. But is that wrong? Like I said, it's only about seeing the words more clearly, seeing yourself more clearly. It's more about just shifting your perspective. Could be a little bit one way, could be a little bit the other way. But in doing so, your horizons broaden to see more of what is out there. That's already out there. I try my best to give the best of me. But therein lies the conundrum. It's impossible to continuously offer the best of yourself if you aren't naturally selfish. Nothing lasts forever. What once might have been the best of you could become outdated and boring. It was a tough pill for me to swallow when I understood that my selflessness, something I perceived to be a strength, could threaten my potential to become the best version of myself. English novelist Mary Ann Evans, known better by her pen name George Eliot, said it's never too late to become what you might have been. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. The only thing that's different is how we choose to spend those 1,440 minutes. What we give our attention to. To express yourself vulnerably is somewhat selfish. But that's not wrong. You're not asking for anything in return when doing so. Think about how many times just, water cooler talk. How are you? Good. Oh, the weather. Instead of just saying something like, my morning was rough. Oh, I'm feeling a little bit beat down. Instead of being so quick to dismiss with conditioned responses, it's okay to express a little bit more. And of course, if you do so, you open yourself up to potentially the judgment of others, but these are the scenarios that I'm talking about where so often we resort to default instead of pushing the envelope. But the irony of the whole situation is that by allowing yourself to push a little bit deeper, to share a little bit more, you ultimately present the opportunity for the other person to do the same. And what you'll come to see is that it's not judgment on the other end, but acceptance and relatability. Expressing yourself vulnerably helps you feel a bit lighter. Because ultimately, what this is all about is one word that can mean 10 different things to 10 different people. Happiness or being happy. I think the feeling of being content sometimes gets mistaken with being happy. And there's nothing wrong with being content. I'm living in a first world country, I have a stable job, friends, good health. These signs say I should be happy, right? Unfortunately, there's often something missing that we can't put our finger on. As we begin adulting, we get hit with waves of responsibility, such as maintaining a career, running errands, taking care of others, doing chores, paying bills, throwing whatever else is on your plate. It's not like we're in a global pandemic or anything. I believe a very important resource in understanding what holds people back from finding happiness is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'll give you guys the quick and dirty from Wikipedia. It was a theory proposed by a psychology professor named Abraham Maslow in 1943. And the theory is a key foundation in understanding how drive and motivation are correlated with human behavior. The needs are shaped like a pyramid. So at the bottom, you have physiological needs. So food, water, warmth, and rest, your need for these things. Followed by safety needs, the need to have security and safety. The next level up are your psychological needs. So the intimate relationships that you form, the friends that you have, that feeling of belongingness and love and community. Above that are your esteem needs. The feeling of prestige and feeling accomplished. And lastly, at the top of that pyramid are self-fulfillment needs. Achieving your full potential, which includes but is not limited to creative work and activities outside yourself. Formerly, it was thought that needs lower down on the pyramid had to be satisfied before we could attend to some of the needs of the higher quadrants. But there's discussion today that the different levels of needs have started to overlap each other, meaning that for some people, the need for security and safety might not be as much of a concern as the need to fulfill your sense of self. And that's something that you're seeing a lot of nowadays. The reason why I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs is important is that for a significant period of time, our basic needs are covered by our parents and guardians. We're provided with food, water, warmth, rest, security, and safety. As a result, we have less real responsibilities, less problems. These times are typically remembered as the good old days. During this period of our lives, we have a lot more freedom to explore the things that help us grow and realize our potential, while providing us with a sense of fulfillment to keep coming back for more. And that fulfills our need of self-actualization, that top section of the pyramid. Essentially, this is the part of the pyramid where we develop our character. Our interests, our hobbies, our passions, likes and dislikes, our dreams and grand aspirations. A desire to become everything one is capable of becoming, as Maslow himself said. Until you enter adulthood, everybody thinks that they have the world figured out. Do you remember being 15 and thinking in 10 years, I'm going to be a successful this, that, and the other. I'm going to have a house, a car, a boat. I'll have traveled to these many countries, and the list of personal achievements will only be limited by my ambitions. And then once you hit adulthood, you realize that those aspirations might require a bit more than 10 years to obtain. For instance, there's only a 0.5% chance of being selected as a NASA astronaut. Meanwhile, the average residential price in the GTA has probably jumped over $500,000 in the last 10 years. And most new grad positions don't hire you without 2 years of experience and don't pay enough to cover your monthly debts. Welcome to the game of life. At some point in your life, your pyramid will become rearranged. Your need to find a job after losing your current one. You have 2 weeks to find a new place to live. Needing to work longer hours to finish a big project for a client. With all this pressure, we forget about that desire to become everything we are capable of. Because there are so many more immediate responsibilities that must be addressed before we can prioritize ourselves. Before we can invest time back into ourselves. My pyramid shuffled through my journey to become a chartered professional accountant. It was a 1.5-year journey that put me through a lot of stuff and required me to put a lot of stuff that made me happy on hold. Certain people, certain hobbies, interests, and a lot more, while I focused on passing my modules and passing my culminating exam, which was a grueling 3-day, 13-hour exam. My desire to complete my designation became my everything. It's not that I don't want to be an accountant. The career is challenging, it's motivating, and equally rewarding. But just like so many others, I don't want to be known as the accountant. I am, but I'm so much more. And we all are so much more. We're more than our careers, but we get lost sometimes with the only constant that we can fall back on to define ourselves, and that is our career. I typically spent 15 to 20 hours a week to complete assignments and study while trying to manage a 9-to-5 job, my health, and my social life. Some things were downgraded to accommodate for the increased demand, while others were completely removed and forgotten about. It felt ironic to finish the most important exam of my life and question who I was. It was a bitter pill to swallow when I realized that I might have lost my sense of self. I'd placed such a significance on completing that program and that exam and advancing my career that I had sacrificed my need for self-fulfillment. When you get up in the morning, why? Why is it? What is your reason for getting up in the morning? Before I could even answer that question, I had to make some necessary and overdue changes in my life in order to rediscover happiness. For a very long time, I would set my alarm clock as late as possible while still being able to make it to work or school on time. And I got pretty good at waking up and leaving my front door within a 10 to 15 minute window. Add on probably going to sleep later than I should have, and you make for a great start to the day. One of the best decisions I've made in starting my morning right is making sure I sleep on time, because this all comes back to carrying your future self with you. If you care for yourself now, the you of tomorrow will thank you for that. For a long time, I wished I could be one of those people who wakes up early. It's not about how early you wake up, it's just about trying to create more time in the day for you to live. One night I just set my alarm clock back 5 minutes. A few days later, another 5 minutes, then 10 minutes. And I find that if you have a good sleep routine, your body has a much easier time adjusting to the change. Now, back to that original question, why we get up in the morning. And the answer should be really simple. For me, I get up in the morning because I want to. The only days most people want to get up on is Saturday and Sunday. And then we end up dreading Sunday night through Friday morning. That was me. I got up Monday through Friday because I needed to for work, not realizing there was an opportunity for so much more to be discovered. As I said before, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. The only thing that's different is what we decide to do with that time. Our time is energy. We don't need to wake up at 6 a.m. every morning, and I don't. Some days I value extra sleep. However, developing the mindset to realize that there are pockets of opportunity every day, 30 minutes here, 40 minutes there, even 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Just because you can't finish something within a given window doesn't mean you shouldn't start. And I think ultimately this lesson that I'm trying to share is that we shouldn't compromise on our happiness. That should be our number one priority. I understand now that if I'm not happy with myself, I cannot expect to make those around me happy or even attract the feeling of happiness because it's not genuine. And we have to realize that happiness isn't static. It's quite dynamic and it takes a lot of effort to maintain, especially when other emotions, pressures, and stressors come in and overshadow that feeling of happiness. Sometimes you might even stop doing things you once loved that made you happy. You might forget why you even started something in the first place because the feeling of happiness is the last thing you currently associate it with. I know I've experienced that frustration and loss of happiness throughout my combat sports journey, after losses or injuries or feeling that nothing is going my way. But no matter the lows, whether it's been my loss in the finals, physical setbacks from injuries, and all of the accompanying mental and emotional side effects, all that's insignificant in comparison to the happiness that is derived from pursuing that endeavor of combat sports for me. And for some of you, that happiness might come in other elements. The common theme remains that these experiences push us and help us discover something new about how much we are truly capable of. This is that feeling of self-fulfillment that I believe we should all chase to some degree in the things that we do. I remember being 10 or 11 years old, spending countless hours with friends drawing random doodles and comics, some of which I still have. And I might not have the hours to dedicate to drawing anymore, but I've been able to find pockets of time. Half an hour here, an hour there while unwinding at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be drawing for you. But I encourage you to rediscover the things that you haven't done in a while, that bring back that feeling of happiness, and then go share that happiness with others. There's a direct correlation between happiness, between true expression of selfishness and vulnerability to our mental health, which is such a complicated topic to talk about. because it touches on things that aren't physical. We can't directly see what poor mental health looks like on the outside. Not on the surface, not all the time. Sometimes, yes. But we only start to see it when it becomes rampant. When someone's mental health has gone unchecked and they've deteriorated to a point where it's evident to everyone. That person snapped. They cracked. They couldn't be vulnerable with themselves or with someone else. They couldn't selfishly tell someone that everything was not okay. And by trying to tackle these issues themselves, their happiness suffers. And in such a connected society, we wear that smile as a veil, which stops us from authentically expressing ourselves as who we are in that moment. So to be the best version of yourself, you have to prioritize yourself as such. It's not about just being one thing or the other, but understanding that balance is essential for a sustainable and happy life. Things don't have to be perfect all the time, and they never really will be. They don't have to be great either, but don't deny what is there in front of you. Confront it, embrace it. As I said before, it's easy for us to treat others the way we would like to be treated, but much harder for us to treat ourselves the way we'd like to be treated. So next time you look in a mirror, just check in with yourself. Allow yourself to be seen for all of you. Don't cast any judgment. Accept. And in doing so, you love. You create space from your ego and you embrace your soul. And ultimately, that's what it's all about. So as we come out of winter's hibernation with energy and enthusiasm for what's to come next, I hope you're able to embrace spring as the season which represents new life, love, renewal and rebirth, and the growth for the seeds that you wish to water and manifest in the year ahead. So until next time, stay safe, be kind, and I look forward to our next session.